Let's move on and talk about X-Men: The Last Stand, which came out 3 years later in 2006. They quickly went into production on this movie, again, just due to the success of X2, huge critical and financial success. And so all steam was moving forward on the conclusion of this trilogy, or at least what we thought would be the conclusion. The big thing to mention is that Bryan Singer did not come back. He instead decided to go direct Superman Returns for Warner Brothers, which came out that same year in 2006. Do you think that this is a better movie with him on board, or is it still plagued with a lot of the problems that we ultimately see manifest in the film?
I think it's a better movie, bro. I do. I think Bryan Singer being part of that third movie changes a lot. I do, because he had a tone established in the first two, and part of the reason the third one is so like, what happened is the tone just changes, and you're like, I can like visually see like so many differences out of the gate from the first two. Yeah, I think it's a better movie with him in it.
Probably, yeah. I think I would tend to agree. I don't think it's significantly better, but I do think it's better than what we got. I only say that just because I think by this point, the third movie, and we saw the same thing happen a year later with Spider-Man, there is so much pressure from the studio now because you have a bona fide smash hit. We have to make more money. This has to be huge. This has to be epic. You have to include this character and this story and this villain. It just becomes so convoluted because of studio interference and what they want. And that's exactly what happened with Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi was like, I want Sandman. The studio's like, we want Venom. I don't want to do that. Well, fuck you. You have to put Venom in or you're not directing this movie. And I think that's probably why Bryan Singer left. He probably got to the table and was like, y'all are trying to do too much. And I can go direct Superman over here. Now, that movie... Superman Returns is not good at all. So, you know, he lost either way. He stepped away from that franchise and he had to go direct Superman Returns it's a worse movie than even The Last Stand is. Like I would watch The Last Stand any day before Superman Returns. So it didn't work out for him, but it's just kind of crazy, you know, just the timing and how things change over time. Expectations play a lot into this. Joss Whedon at this point, who was writing actively for Marvel Comics, he had wrote the Gifted storyline from Astonishing X-Men. He turned down the offer to direct because he was working on a Wonder Woman film that was in development at the time from DC, which ultimately morphed and grew and evolved into what we saw with Patty Jenkins like 11 years after this. And so this was early development on a Wonder Woman movie out of DC. Just a crazy thing. Zack Snyder was approached for this movie. This was a younger Zack Snyder as he was starting to really make a name for himself after Dawn of the Dead, but he had already committed to filming 300. I think a better choice for him, obviously, there. Peter Berg was also considered to direct the film, but he turned down the job. Guillermo del Toro was offered to direct the film, but he turned it down because he was already committed to Pan's Labyrinth. Thank God he made that movie instead of X-Men: The Last Stand. And then by February 2005, with no director hired, Fox announced a release date. They slotted in May 5th, 2006, and they were going to start filming by July of 2005 in Vancouver. So they were like, we don't have a director, but we're still going to start filming anyway. Like we're going to find something. And I remember this actively happening at this time. I remember reading about this. This was when I really started to get like more involved online and started to learn more about productions and find out about casting choices. I was becoming pretty active in that space and finding out things. And I remember seeing this and thinking like, that seems weird. Like you need a director and we don't have anybody, but you have a date. And we see this problem all the time with Hollywood, you know, just the slotting and the choosing of release dates with scripts not ready, with directors not chosen. Like, why are we doing? And, you know, it's competitive and you only have but so many dates. And there's obviously competition between studios. Like, we want this date and we want this date. We want this date. But I mean, it seems a little foolhardy to do something like this. Yeah. And I think we saw the results in the movie and how it all turned out, right?
Yeah, cart before the horse, man. For real. That's why I'm actually always scared when a franchise you love gets too big because of all of the reasons you just said, man. Like, what if the director doesn't come back and then, you know, even if the director does come back, like you said, Sam Raimi, Spider-Man 3, things happen, you know, and trilogies are always the scariest. And we talk about movies themselves, like it's very hard to end things. Trilogies are the same way, right? It's very hard to get that third movie and for everyone to love that third movie. And now it's like the studios are adding on top of that already. The third movie already going to be hard to make and to finish the trilogy.
And y'all are making it fucking harder. Y'all are exponentially harder.
It's ridiculous, man. We have to stop it. But it just makes me afraid. Now every third movie that comes out, I'm like, oh, please be good. Even like I shouldn't be because he's proved himself, but even Ty West's Maxine, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's the third movie. What are we gonna do? You know what I'm saying? And it's just the feeling of even if everything looks good, it's the feeling of a third movie that constantly keeps coming back. Like, oh my god, I hope this movie is good because it's happened so many times. Spider-Man 3, Terminator 3, like it's too much. It's too much. Some people get lucky. Sometimes you get a Toy Story 3. We need more of those. We need more Toy Story 3s in the world. You know what I mean? But it has to, it's I wish it went like this, and or I wish it went like that, but simply The Last Stand did not go like that. It's unfortunate.
What was the best example of a third film in a trilogy at this point? Like, what stuck the landing? The only one I can legit think of is The Return of the King. That's it.
Oh man, that's like the best third movie like
of all time. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's like it's literally the Return of the King of the Return of the King. Like it is what we set the bar for, but it's a lot.
Godfather ish.
A lot of people were disappointed by that.
They were disappointed, but it was good.
It's good, but I think even in hindsight, the 17-year gap, definitely the step down in quality, the fact that Robert Duvall wasn't in it, people were very pissed about that. It's still, I mean, I think even now it's a better movie than people give it credit for, but it was actively definitely regarded as like, this ain't one or two. This is not it. I don't know.
The Last Crusade?
The Last Crusade. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, that people like a lot. I mean, I'm in that camp. People like The Last Crusade almost as good as the first one, or maybe even better than Raiders. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, so that is a good call out.
That's probably the best. That's probably the best at that time.
So The Last Crusade and The Return of the King, which came out 3 years before this,
probably like the best two.
Yeah, you're probably right, because like you said, Spider-Man a year later didn't do it. Terminator 3 obviously not. The Matrix, which was
Return of the Jedi, didn't do it.
No, people were very disappointed by that. The Matrix definitely didn't do it by this point.
They didn't do it. They came out 2 movies in 1 year, whatever that's about.
Yeah, that was a mistake. Clearly a mistake that they shouldn't have done. So,
not Back to the Future.
Nope, people were disappointed by that. Yeah, it just never worked. Clearly,
never worked.
Landing the plane on a trilogy at this point never worked. So already there was apprehension coming into this movie. I think to your point, like, okay, we really don't know what we're doing here, because we're already in a genre that's like finding its footing, and now we have to add on the pressure of, damn, the first movie was solid, the second movie was amazing, can we even get higher than that? And we did not. Unfortunately, we did not. To continue on with the director talk, Matthew Vaughn had signed on to direct, and they ultimately did push the release date a few weeks into Memorial Day weekend of 2006. We know Matthew Vaughn eventually did not direct this movie, but he would come back later to direct X-Men First Class a few years later, which, they sort of circle back to him. But while he was chosen as director, he made a lot of important decisions. He cast Kelsey Grammer as Beast.
Good idea.
He casted Danya Ramirez as Callisto, and he also casted Vinnie Jones as Juggernaut. But ultimately, he had some family issues that led him to withdraw. But also, he was cautious of the tight deadlines imposed by Fox, stating that, quote, he didn't have the time to make the movie that he wanted to make, end quote. So there you go. Exactly.
It reminds me of, like, if he had been slotted, it would have reminded me of like David Fincher for Alien 3, kind of. You know what I mean? Like that, remember that tight deadline that he had? Everyone was like, and David Fincher.
And
like,
he hated what he made.
Exactly.
David Fincher doesn't even claim Alien 3. He's like, he's like, don't ever bring a fucking movie up to me again. That would have been Matthew Vaughn.
It kind of feels the same, though. Yeah, it kind of feels like the same. But also a little sad, because like maybe he would have made it a better movie.
Probably, yeah.
He probably made a better movie.
I mean, we saw what he did with First Class, so I think the proof is there that it probably would have been a better movie.
Kick ass.
Yeah,
he liked comic books, man.
Did you see his quotes recently where he said he was surprised by the negative reaction of Argyle? He said that he was like, well, Jesus, like, we didn't make
Did you watch your own movie, bro?
He said we didn't set out to make Citizen Kane, but for fuck's sake, I didn't think it was that bad. And I'm like, well, certainly don't ever mention Citizen Kane in the same sentence as Argyle. Let's start there.
Start there.
Secondly, the movie's fucking bad, bro. It stinks. It fucking stinks. Like it's gonna get shit on. I don't know what to tell you.
That's too funny.
He was surprised. I'm like, you're really surprised by this?
You're surprised? Did you watch your movie, bro?
Yeah, because we had to, and oh boy, I wish I didn't. But here we are. But speaking of it, I mean, in the run up to Argyle, I did mention that for a reason. I didn't just pull that out, for no reason. But in the press run for that, he revealed a story that I don't think anybody had ever heard. He said that the real reason that he left the production was because a group of executives tried to get Halle Berry to sign on to the movie by using a fake script. And that fake script basically included scenes of Storm having more to do. And one of those big sequences would be her going to Africa and rescuing kids from Africa. So they tried to create a fake script to lure her back in to sign on to the project earlier than anticipated. We know that story is not included in the movie, and we know she was in the movie anyway, but he just revealed this like months ago and said, like, I can't be a part of this. If y'all are trying to trick, like, what are you doing? You can't do that. I'm not going to have my name associated with that. And so he says that that's the reason he stepped away. So this, I think, again, just speaks to the weird, bizarre choices that studios were making at this point. Just the hands in the pot, like fake scripts to your actors to get them to sign back on. Like, what is that about?
That is insane. What is that story? Yeah. First of all, shout out to Matthew Vaughn for... I respect him for that. That's a good... If that's the real reason, I definitely respect that, because I can see a world where he's like, no, I'm trying to get this money. Come on, Halle Berry, let's go save some kids in Africa real quick. And then it just don't happen. But like, what were they on? What is that?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Has Halle Berry heard this? Does she know about this?
Oh, I'm sure she does. I think she actually might have responded. I don't know. I don't have it up in front of me, but I think she did talk about, the fact that she probably heard the story secondhand or something. But, she signed on anyway. So I guess no harm, no foul, because it never technically happened. But to try to manipulate your lead star, one of your lead stars this way is
that's crazy.
Again, it was just a different time that we would even have tactics like this at play. Like, why are we doing that? Like, that is just like,
damn. Like, did you ask her?
Yeah, it's
yeah. Did you just say, can you do this?
Oh my god, yeah, that's a really crazy thing. But ultimately they did find a director who was Brett Ratner, who they had considered for the first one. Brett Ratner was a super successful director and an extremely successful producer in Hollywood at this point. He had made Money Talks and Rush Hour 2, a few other films at that. Mm-hmm. And so he ended up signing on to replace Matthew Vaughn, and he was confirmed in 2005. Matthew Vaughn also, or excuse me, not Matthew Vaughn, but Brett Ratner, also a very problematic figure. I don't think we have to litigate it as much as we did Bryan Singer, but stuff came out about him as well during Me Too, sexual assault, a lot of unprofessional behavior. The big story that came out after this movie that's been talked about multiple times is how he outed Elliot Page on the set of the movie as being gay, and yelled at him and did a bunch of stuff. And this was all before Elliot Page came out, a few years ago as a trans man. But at that particular time, he was playing the Kitty Pryde character in the movie and had a really, really awkward encounter with Brett Ratner. And then ultimately, Anna Paquin had corroborated the story, basically to say, like, yeah, I was there when this happened. So, like, this did go down. And so Brett Ratner, not a great guy. But here we are, again, talking about the same themes. From a writing standpoint, Simon Kinberg, he worked on other Fox movies, Fantastic Four and Elektra. We'll be talking about those in a few weeks. He was hired to write X-Men 3. Simon Kinberg will go on to be super important to this franchise and be very, very involved in future films. And then X2 co-writer Zach Penn was separately working on his own draft, and the two joined forces for a combined screenplay in 2005. So they ran that fucking method back. They said, oh, it worked for X2. Let's do it again. Let's make up two scripts and bring the best parts of both and come together. Kinberg, he wanted to do the Dark Phoenix the Dark Phoenix saga story from Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont. And he thought that was going to be a really heavy emotional plot point of the film. And the writers, had to fight Fox executives to retain that Phoenix plot line because the studio only wanted to focus on the Cure story that was included in the movie, as it provided a reason for Magneto's conflict with the X-Men. But basically still, this resulted in, let's use both. Let's incorporate both elements of the story. And Zach Penn, he defended, the divergences that they made from the original Dark Phoenix storyline, because this is way different than what happens in the comics. This is like,
oh yeah, it is.
It's nothing like that. But he basically stated that the Phoenix was not a fire-shaped or a Firebird-shaped cosmic force in this movie, quote, because it doesn't fit into the world, end quote. And they also made the choice to not give Cyclops as much screen time here because Wolverine was more popular. And Cyclops, it's, quote, harder. You can't see his eyes, and it's a harder character to relate to for the audience, end quote. There's also a story out there lingering that, they wrote out Cyclops and James Marsden out of this movie because he would ultimately go on to be in that Superman Returns movie directed by Bryan Singer.
That's true. That's true.
Which is just, actors do joint movies all the time now. They're in multiple franchises. Like, so to think that was an excuse given is just kind of a weird thing. But we should talk about this right now, though. This Dark Phoenix element, this is the big component to the movie that got a lot of people excited, but ultimately it garnered a lot of vitriol and hate because of just what they did with this adaptation of this character and of this story. They obviously were going back and forth, but they made the active choice to say, like, we're not going to make it really anything like the comics. It's not going to have any ties to being a cosmic force. We're not going to see the bird. We're going to do something totally different, really. We're going to make it like a split personality situation with Jean Grey. We'll do some physical changes and differentiation between how she normally looks, but it really, again, just won't resemble what I think a lot of people associated with in the comics. And so how do you feel about that? This became, I think, really the sticking point of the film, and for why a lot of people look down on it all these years later.
Yeah, it was just kind of weird. And definitely rushed and awkward, and things were just happening. I can't. There's just so much there. Like they said, it doesn't fit into the world, but what you did didn't really fit either. You know what I mean? Like there's actually so many elements to this, I think, and the reasons why it didn't work. One is that split personality thing you're talking about. It's like part Jean, part Phoenix. I love you, Scott. Kill Scott in like the first 30 minutes of the movie, which is still nuts to me.
Off screen at that. He's not even on screen when you see him die.
They're like, oh yeah,
real fuck you.
Wolverine's like, oh, I think she killed Scott. I was like, damn, that nigga really dead, huh? Like he's really gone. Which is funny because they have been sidelining Cyclops since day one, boy. Specifically in X2, if you watch that movie, he looks like he's supposed to be in the Matrix. Like he has like all black on all the time. He has his visor on. It's like, why are you so emo, bro? Like, what is this? Like, what is this character? He's literally he's literally muted. Literally muted. Like, he has all black everything. He's not. Then they give him sorrow. He's sad all the time because Jean is gone or, doing. It's just, yeah. And then they kill him. It's just like, damn, Cyclops, you like could not win ever in this series. They wrote him so bad. But back to Jean, man, it was just like this. Another one of those reasons that Phoenix didn't work is because they had already had, I think, problems conveying powers already, like in the franchise, or like
100%. Yeah.
What did we get from Storm? Storm did some twirlies.
That's really all she did ever with her fucking powers. It's kind of amazing. Like everything you can do with storms and weather and lightning and thunder, and she just did a fucking 720 in the air.
720 in the air to get from. She had like the one little tornado moment at the beginning of at the end of X1 to try to get Wolverine to the machine. Even that, like, it's kind of air you can barely see. Like, I wish you could like actually see a tornado. You know what I'm saying? Like, can you imagine like, oh, there's actually a tornado there, or oh, she made it foggy a couple. But like the way they conveyed powers really only worked with like Wolverine had actual tangible claws. If it was CGI, it didn't look like they did anything. Jean would just kind of sit there, and that's it. She had like a grimace on her face, and that was her power. Oh, the Phoenix is coming. Right. And so that was also like part of why the Phoenix wasn't working for me sometimes. It's like you're just kind of like staring Or of course, there's the dark moments where she's just like killing people and they evaporate. That shit look crazy, of course. Like, oh shit, niggas is evaporating. Don't get me wrong, but there was always like this is how we're conveying the power of this phoenix. Like, is that what this is? And again, it happened fast. The exposition dump came in the first 5 minutes. She's laying on the table with Wolverine, and Professor X has to tell her, oh yeah, the Phoenix is this galactic entity, and this happens. That was 5 minutes of that's what the Phoenix is. Now go to your playground, Jean. And she kicks open the door, goes through the door, and now she's the Phoenix all of a sudden. It was just very, very rushed. And yeah, what a weird time. And having to fight between screen time of this and The Cure was a whole nother thing. Like you said, that was the villain. The villain was technically a mutant that wasn't bad. He just happens to mute powers. Mm-hmm. That's the other villain in the movie. And how do we bring those two things together? It was all very weird. It did create one of my the moments I like better in the film is the moment where they get to Jean's house and all of that kind of goes down. That is a moment I was like, oh, I don't know what's going down here. Like I did feel tension. That was one of the better moments in the movie. But overall, man, the Phoenix was just too much. It was too much. It was either they couldn't find like an extreme. It was like too much going on or not enough going on. They couldn't find the middle ground there. It was weird.
It just shouldn't have been in the movie, period. It just should. It had no place in this movie. I think to elaborate on the point about the rushed pieces of these moments, I mean, I'm always surprised anytime I go back and look at this movie to see how short it is. It's an hour and 44 minutes. Yeah. And you don't ever see that these days with superhero films. They're often, pretty long.
X2 was longer.
Yeah, X2 was definitely longer. And it's just like, for your third film, that's supposed to conclude the story, why are you not taking up as much space as you can? Like, you actually, absolutely, as a franchise, with respect, you've earned my time. You've earned the ability to say, we're going to make a 2 hour and 20-minute movie to conclude this properly. We're going to make a 2.5 hour movie. Like, why are we shortchanging the moments of what you're including in the story here? And to be honest, I'm always asking for shorter movies. It's refreshing to me. And now, like all these years later, now that, it's not, sort of top of mind, and we've rested with the legacy of this film, to see that it is so short, I'm relieved. I'm like, I don't have to watch this too long. So like, great, it's in and out. But like, in the context of what they were doing, like, they should have taken more time. Like, it should have just been a longer movie. I mean, even Matthew Vaughn at one point said, like, my movie would have been 40 minutes longer. Like, it would have had a lot more emotional depth, and it would have been 40 minutes longer. And it's like, yeah, it should have been. Like, there's no reason that y'all had to rush. Every moment in this movie feels rushed. Every scene, every moment of dialogue, even the things that do work, like the sequence at Jean's house. Like, I do like that sequence, but it moves just too quickly. Like, as soon as Charles and Eric get into the house, she's already like, Charles, you're trying to fucking control me. Stop trying to control me. Stop. Like, we take no time to just let stuff breathe. Like, let's just have a great scene of dialogue and let things breathe. Let's really unpack this. Let's go deeper. And it's just like hitting quick. And I think a lot of that is because Brett Ratner was a comedy director. He was directing comedy films that are designed to be
that makes
90 minutes long at most. Rush Hour and Money Talk. Like, those are not long movies. Comedies are not long. And I think that that's why we get this quick pacing film, but it ultimately takes away from it. It doesn't help it by any stretch of the imagination. We should talk about some of these character deaths. We already talked about Cyclops. That was just, crazy. It was Fox's decision, apparently, based on James Marsden availability. Again, I just, for that to be a reason at that time, I feel like, honestly, I think that's I think it was a fuck you to Bryan Singer. I think that that's what it was. I think that they were probably tight that he left to go direct Superman. James Marsden was going with him, so they were like, "We're gonna kill your character," because we just see it all the time now. You can figure this shit out. You can figure out schedules. You can figure out how to get people, involved. Like,
push it back. Do what you got to do something to make a good movie.
Yeah. So I think that was just bullshit. But Xavier's death was a huge talking point about this movie. The reason it was conceived is because they wanted to give something that can match the impact and the emotional depth of what Spock's demise represented in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Fox felt that the script had called for a really dramatic turning point, and it needed something significant. So Simon Kinberg, Zach Penn, they were originally cautious of this idea, but they grew to like the idea of killing off Xavier. But they decided to write in that post-credit scene suggesting that he wasn't dead after all and that he would come back, which we know that he did. But at the time, we didn't know that. Like, he died in the movie. And it's a pretty impactful scene. What do you remember about this one? Because I remember actively, like, I was pissed, but I was also sad because it felt permanent as fuck at that time that he was actually gone out of the franchise.
No, same. I was just like, oh shit, we really killed him. And again, as messy as the movie is, I think they did a good job of making me feel like his death was permanent. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot of nowadays somebody dies, you're like, he'll be back, or they'll be back. That was one of those moments. I was like, that boy really might not come back. Like he kind of got evaporated.
Yeah, how do you come back from that?
That was like one of the good things that they did do with Jean again in this movie was the way she just would kill people. And you're like, damn, they're not coming back. Like she would just evaporate them. And Professor X was like one of the first examples with them. Again, Cyclops you see off screen. So this was like a little bit more effective of you seeing it happen in real time. And there's so much, the house is shaking and there's so much going down. And it's like, not only that, but the look that Professor X gives to Wolverine and Storm before he dies, or maybe it was Magneto, was just like he smiles.
Yeah,
that was so like scary to me. Of like now everything else is in your hands, kind of smile. Like I'm really not coming back. Like this is it, almost kind of type thing.
Good luck.
Like good. Like I'm happy to go. I guess it's my time because there were so many moments. Because even earlier in the movie. I forgot what Professor X says, but Storm goes, there's something you're not telling us. Mm-hmm. And it almost feels like he knew he was going to die in that moment. That makes it seem like he's not coming back. Like he knew it was his time. So yeah, I remember also being like both mad and sad. Like, damn, they really just killed off Professor X. But I do feel like they did a little bit of work to make us feel that moment. And so yeah, it was just like, damn, this is crazy.
Charles was full of shit, man. He was full of shit, crazy. I mean, even him and Wolverine in this film, they're at odds for a lot of it. Like the beginning moments, they're like, yo, Charles like feels a certain type of way, like you shouldn't be talking to Jean, like I need to connect with her, and obviously Wolverine's like, what are you not telling us? Like obviously stuff is going on here, so they're already at odds, and it does imply that Charles knows obviously a lot more, which goes back to like the opening scene of the movie where we see them meet her, at a very young age, and so it was a really effective moment, but they didn't even live with their decision because like you fast forward 55 minutes in the post-credit scene, Moira McTaggart is there like, oh, Charles, like if you saw it at that time, this was before post-credit scenes even got popular. I remember like I didn't even see that post-credit scene in theaters. Like I didn't see that shit until like months and months later on DVD because I didn't realize that they had a post-credit scene in the movie. It was kind of crazy. But overall though, I felt like that this movie leaned far too heavily on death. Like there's one thing to have a meaningful character death, but the fact that we did Cyclops and Charles and also Jean Grey, technically as well, she died in this movie, plus all of just like the random other mutants that died or lost their powers, because a lot of them were getting cured left and right. Mystique and fucking Magneto just dumps her to the curb. All of the quote unquote pawns, that get their powers taken away. It just felt like that they did a little bit too much. Like they leaned far too heavily in the sacrificial, tragic nature of like concluding a story. It felt like that they wanted to make it too dark almost, like we have to raise the stakes so significantly that we're killing off multiple lead characters now. I don't know. It just felt like it was a little overcooked in that respect.
Yeah, it was like you said, it was hella dark, like crazy dark. I couldn't even like, again, in the rewatch, and I always known this because again, this is the one I watched the most. But it's something about going back, being older, and being like, y'all was killing a lot of people. Like it was crazy. And of course, Magneto killed more people. And then seeing how many mutants lost their powers, because then it's just like, so what are we doing here? Like mutants are losing their powers, humans are dying, mutants are losing powers. So everybody loses. Like that's what it felt like by the end of it, is like, so everybody lost. Like Wolverine having to kill Jean was sad. Jean had already killed Cyclops. Professor X is dead. I was like, who is left? What are we doing? Because imagine if there was an X4.
What cast?
Who do we have? What cast? Wait, there's no Cyclops, no Jean, and no Professor X. And no Magneto. He ain't had no power. I mean, I guess there's a post-credit scene that showed he still had his powers. Which, how? Where's the Mystique? Did Mystique get her powers back too? Why Magneto get his powers back?
No, she went to the government and spilled all the secrets and
man.
Hell hath no fury like a woman's. I'm just like, oh brother, here we go.
man, it's just like it did get hella dark. It was crazy, man. I don't know where they could have gone from there. I really don't. The Last Stand is right. They really expected it to be the last movie though. They really was like, there's not, but they have post-credit scenes. It's crazy. I don't know, man. It's insane.
I dare you to make a fucking another movie. I'm gonna kill off. I dare you to make try it, motherfucker. Try to make another movie. You got to set that bitch 60 years in the past, like y'all did with First Class.
Exactly.
Yeah, they just overdid it. I don't like. We didn't. If Charles was the one death, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I can live with that because they actually put the most behind that. Everybody else was just so unnecessary. You know, they just did not have to go that far and do that much with it. And also Mystique, like losing, she's one of the coolest characters. And
I was like,
and we haven't even fully maximized her potential up until this point. That's why they had to like market correct and overcorrect with Jennifer Lawrence later on. They had to like really, give a lot,
bring her to the forefront,
really bring it to the forefront because they didn't do shit with Rebecca Romaine Stamos really in any of these. But she had a couple of cool.
Just made her fight.
That's it. Yeah, but the storyline, I'm just like, yo, y'all are tripping here for sure.
Magneto dropped her like a bad habit, boy.
Which, by the way, I was thinking about this as I was watching it too. Ian McKellen, in this movie, so Magneto is a villain, as we know. Like he is truly a villain, but he is also like one of those villains that you look at his points that he makes, and it's like, I see what you're saying here. I get it. We talked a lot about that just recently with X-Men 97. I kind of felt like his characterization here went against who Magneto really is. Like in the moment on the bridge when they're at the prison and he sends all of the mutants to fight, and he's like, there's a reason the pawns go first. And I'm like, would Magneto just willingly sacrifice mutant lives just that easily? That just felt all wrong to me.
Especially there's a moment maybe 30 minutes before that, I think, when they're in the woods, and Magneto gets to saying, Pyro says, I would have killed Professor X if you told me to. And Magneto was like, my biggest regret is that Professor X had to die in order for my dream to live.
Exactly.
And then, so you don't want mutant deaths, but they can turn into, I feel like Magneto would have thought that mutants being turned into humans or being cured is the same thing as death.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like he would have made those parallel. Like those would have been the same idea.
It feels like he kind of does, because once Mystique loses her powers, I mean, she's a non-factor. She's not even a part of the cause anymore. It's for the cause. It's for mutant kind, but he just ditches her. So you would almost think that losing the power. I mean, even when he loses his powers in the moment when Beast stabs him, like the look on his face and the reaction, he's like, I'm and Logan has to finish his line like, you're human, like you're not special. You're one of them. Like that's probably the equivalent of death to him, but he does not display that behavior at all to just let all those mutants die or lose their powers, I should say, in that fight. That just didn't make sense to me. I was just like, this doesn't add up. This is all contradictory stuff happening now, which, it just, I think, contributes to the rush nature of what this movie ultimately was. A few other quick trivia points. Gambit was considered for the movie. He was considered to be in the convoy scene where they free Juggernaut ultimately, and he was going to be freed by Magneto. And they also considered him for that battle of Alcatraz that took place later, but the writers did not want to introduce a fan favorite character and, quote, not be able to do him justice. And there just wasn't enough space, and considered that Gambit would only work in this movie if he had as much screen time as Beast. And also, as I mentioned earlier, Alan Cumming, he did not come back. He just did not like the long hours that it took with the prosthetic makeup. So Kelsey Grammer took his place. Go sit in the chair for 7 hours and fucking put that makeup on, my guy. You're going to be the blue one in this movie.
Right.
But Gambit, man, that, we didn't get him here. And we never did get him.
We never got him.
They just, this is one of the things. This is one of the things we push off and push off and push off. And unlike the Danger Room, which we did get in the top of this movie, Gambit has still not come to fruition. Maybe we can correct that in a few short weeks here. I won't say more, but maybe that can be corrected. But anyway, Gambit did not appear in this movie,
I hope so.
nor in any other movies. How do you feel about just that choice to remove him from these scenes?
Yeah, including him in the convoy scene makes a lot of sense because we only get Juggernaut in Multiple Man.
Yeah.
I thought there would be like more, well, I guess Mystique too, but I thought there would be a couple more important, I think, mutants in there. So I didn't know that, but that makes a ton of sense that he would have been in there. Also, I just thought about that moment where Mystique was changing. He was just like, shut up, I'll spray you in the face, bitch. I just thought that was funny. Because I actually, in the rewatch, I can't believe they put that in the movie. Like, keep it up. I'll spray you in the face, bitch. I was like, what?
That is out of control that he
is
said that.
so crazy, bro. I was like, whoa, this is really in the movie. But yeah, I also understand as much as they had going on with all these multiple storylines of them not being able to include Gambit, but they was able to include Archangel. Colossus had a little bit more to do. It's like
Callisto
I get
is
it,
in there.
I get it, but also the dude with the porcupine guy is in there, and like I get it, but also y'all had all these other X-Men that Gambit would have been more important or should have succeeded. It's like I see it, but I don't. Like I see it, but I don't. So it's a little bit of a weird argument, I guess, but man, it's sad that we never got. Don't we get them for like 5 minutes in Origins? I know I haven't done my rewatch yet. We're gonna talk about it later, but I'm pretty sure we get them for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's a little something in there from what I remember. But obviously, it was ultimately just to be a tease for the Gambit movie that they were gonna make with
with Channing Tatum. That's so weird. We were supposed to get Channing Tatum as I wonder who Gambit would have been if this moment had happened.
Yeah, because I don't think it couldn't. Channing Tatum wasn't even. I mean, he was around, but I don't think that they would have been looking for him at this point.
Though.
Yeah. What he had been in what Step Up at this point? Maybe Step Up.
Yup, I think so.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know who they would have considered. But I think to your point, if he was included in the movie, he would have just been relegated to almost
Step
a nothing
Up
role.
Is the same year.
Oh wow, in the same exact year.
06.
Okay.
Yep.
Good choice for him doing Step Up instead of this. But yeah, he would have been Ken Leung, who's a really well respected working actor. He was the Omega's lizard man, the porcupine, sort of looking character that you talked about. I remember first seeing Jun Tao. That's the first time I ever saw him, and he wasn't even the real Jun Tao. He was like the fake Jun Tao, but wipe yourself off, you're bleeding. That was that was good stuff.
A movie.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I think they made a decent choice there, but they didn't service many of the other characters that were included here as well, because they had a lot of mutants popping up left and right. Like the Archangel stuff is just like strange to have here. So, like I don't really get that one.
It's to be honest, it is one of the things I like more about the movie. I know that's weird, but it was like, oh, there's more mutants. But then on the whole opposite direction, it makes me mad about the movie, because it's like, what are we doing with these characters? Because even the movie starts with Archangel as a kid trying to cut the wings off his back, right? Yeah. That was a hella dark moment. Like I was like, wings on the ground, and he's putting all these tools away, trying to cut the wings out of his back. But like eventually, they don't really do much with him. He just kind of shows up to the X-Mansion. Like, oh, is this a safe place to be? And Storm is like, yeah, it's a safe place. Like, it's just weird. It's weird, man.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Young Ben Foster in that role before he really blew up. Yep. He's a really, really good actor. Love him in 3:10 to Yuma, by the way. He's but they did not. They had some interesting characters, obviously, that they wanted to play with and really, blow out more mutants and do more stuff. But yeah, I just don't think you need them here if you're not going to give them serviceable stories. Like he was really just kind of the proxy for, oh, hey, look, my parent doesn't accept the fact that I'm a mutant, and he's also like he's working with these scientists to develop this cure and to test it out on me. Like that's the reason he was included in the movie. I get that, but there's a lot left on the table. And if they were going to include him in here, if he's going to have such a minimal role, then you would just expect that, like, okay, they're going to make a fourth one, and he'll have a bigger presence in the next one, like
because now he's an X-Men.
Now he's an X-Men. He does go to the school, and we start to see like how that starts to formulate and stuff like that. But we never really got there. But ultimately, this movie comes out. Not that well received critically, only a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences did give it an A- on Cinema Score, so not the worst score ever, but just a step down from X2. The production budget for this movie was $210 million, which at that time was the most expensive film ever made, which is kind of crazy to think about. That was the most expensive movie at the time, $210 million. Now that's just standard for blockbusters. Like every blockbuster costs $200, but at that time, no amount of money had ever been spent on a superhero movie. A lot of that production budget went to the Golden Gate Bridge sequence, where Magneto lifts up the Golden Gate Bridge and transports it to create the bridge between San Francisco and Alcatraz, which was an extensive, really difficult scene, required a lot of CGI, a lot of background characters. I watched that scene and I'm like, did you really have to do that to get over there? I don't think we had to. I don't think we had to destroy the Golden Gate Bridge for you to get to.
We couldn't just walk over here. Like fly.
You can't walk because it's definitely an island, but
it was no bridge, but like use a boat.
A boat.
You got all these mutants.
I'm sure
at the beginning of the fight, like 20 mutants leaped. By the way, like he's like everyone.
You got some flyers and levitators here, my guy.
It was like 20 people hopping. I'm like, you couldn't use none of them to get out. Like
do a transport back and forth system, like a little relay. You three carry us over there, like. To destroy the Golden Gate Bridge to get over, it felt a little excessive.
Magneto is one of the characters they did a better job of using his powers. Still didn't do like perfect, but like at least they did some things with him. Again, the X2 iron out of the blood. I think they wanted like another Magneto was him,
like
moment.
A big,
know what I mean?
Big bombastic moment. Yeah,
because there is a little bit in this third movie about classes, right? Callisto is like, oh, you're a there's somebody above you, and ends up being Jean in terms of class. Everyone else here is a class 3, which, by the way, can you imagine being like a class 3 mutant? That shit gotta suck. Like, you don't really imagine just like you wake up and you green, bro.
Where do you fit
like,
in at that point? Like, yeah,
like I'm just green. Like, what am I doing? That sucks. But yeah, I think they were trying to like convey like. Again, they didn't really say Omega level mutant, but they just wanted to convey the power of Magneto, and I think they could have found another way. Yeah, they definitely could have found another way.
I get it. You want these big epic sequences. I don't want to step on Days of Future Past, that pie when we do it, but what's more impressive? Magneto lifting up the Golden Gate Bridge here, or in Days of Future Past, his younger self lifting up that stadium to surround it by the White House? Because those are probably the two biggest displays of powers we're seeing out of him in a live action context, at least.
No, you're right. It's definitely that stadium for sure. But I think Golden Gate is just people know what that is, and I think that maybe that's what it was. People were like, maybe they were supposed to be like, "Ooh, Golden Gate Bridge. We know what that landmark, kind of thing is." Maybe that's it. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think
they need some skeptical or some spectacle.
This might have been the first time I remember seeing the Golden Gate Bridge just like actively get fucked up in a movie. And after this, it became a trend. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Godzilla. A lot of movies started like fucking around with the Golden Gate Bridge after this, but I don't really remember a movie before this tackling
I remember part of it was because they couldn't touch buildings anymore because 9/11 had happened.
Oh yeah, they were definitely getting away from that.
Not trying
monuments and shit.
Yeah. Now they were like, "Oh, we could do some bridges." They were like, "Oh yeah, bridge shine."
Yeah. Oh yeah, bridge is fine. It's only like hundreds of people on it. It's like it's fine. We just we won't do a building. No, that's you know what? You're probably 100% right on that. We weren't seeing any cinema at this time. Crashing buildings, planes in the but that was big in the 90s though, which is I mean, the disaster films of the 90s like Armageddon and Deep Impact. You watch those movies, I'm like, yo, y'all are fucking everything up. Buildings are just toppling over. The Empire State Building. Nothing is safe.
Independence Day.
Let's just blow up the White House. Yeah. Let's just destroy all of New York and Manhattan. Like, why not? Because we can. But it was super sensitive after 9/11. Like they didn't want to create those feelings of unease and just the tension associated with that. So they had to get creative. So I guess that's another reasonable point as to why they went with a bridge instead of like any other monument. But yeah, this movie ultimately made $459 million worldwide to steer the car back that way. A lot of money, but again, not critically that successful. In the top 10 that year, I'll just quickly read. At number 10, highest grossing movie worldwide, Happy Feet. Number 9 was Superman Returns. Shout out to George Miller. Number 8, Mission Impossible 3. Number 7, X-Men The Last Stand. Number 6, Cars. 5, Night at the Museum. 4, Casino Royale. 3, Ice Age The Meltdown. 2, The Da Vinci Code. And number 1, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. So
what an interesting list.
Everything here, very interesting. Everything here is a sequel except the Da Vinci Code and Cars and Happy Feet. But the rest of them are sequels, but we do still got a couple of quote unquote originals. I put that in very, very italicized quotes because Da Vinci Code was a very popular book. Cars is Pixar. Happy Feet leaning into animation once again. But X-Men was once again in the top 10. Very, very successful financially. Man, as we close out here, any other observations about X-Men The Last Stand you want to say? Just about like your feelings or reception of the movie? I mean, obviously, I think a lot of people were impacted by this and burned by it because it just wasn't as great as we wanted it to be. And for a little bit of time there, we didn't know what the future of X-Men movies was going to look like. We would soon find out that they were going to make more, but they would be
Yeah.
prequels. And we didn't know if we would ever see this cast again either. We know a lot of them did return for Days of Future Past, to kind of rectify the the misdoings of this movie. But we didn't know that upon release. And so, anything else you just want to point out just about your thoughts about the film, how they executed it, and of course, like how it sort of shaped the future direction of future X-Men movies that will come out after it?
Yeah, X-Men The Last Stand. I still have somewhat of a relationship with this movie just because it was the one we had on DVD. So I was made to watch Jean Grey as this weird double phoenix very much. A lot. I've seen it a lot of times. And there's still things I think that are endearing about it. I think Juggernaut is funny. I like seeing Kitty Pryde. I like seeing Colossus. I like seeing just being able to see more mutants in the movie. But again, overall, man, the story just wasn't there. The difference in dynamic between 2 and 3 was too different. You can definitely feel the missed presence of Bryan Singer and kind of, I think, the tone he had established. And you could feel the scope trying to get larger with The Last Stand. But overall, man, those story beats just didn't work out. And I think a lot of these superhero films, almost the same way we talk about some of these new Disney movies not really having a villain, this movie kind of falls into that. This is a movie that no real clear villain. I mean, of course, Magneto was doing his thing, but he's our villain throughout all of this, right? Like he's our constant Magneto here, Magneto there. We needed something else, I think, to chew on, or something more for Magneto to do. Even more for the X-Men to do that just wasn't. Stop. Maybe that just should have been the movie if you're going to do that. Maybe stopping Magneto again should have just been the movie. You know what I mean? Maybe that should have been it. Maybe keep Jean out of it until you can maybe make a fourth movie with the Phoenix. And they weren't doing that. They were shooting for a lot of things in this film, and it ultimately took away from the film. And again, overall, I think I'll still hold a place for this film, but again, it just wasn't the film that it needed to be. And that's pretty much it, man. I'll still always laugh at some of the lines in this film. I'll still always again appreciate that house scene where the death of Professor X eventually happens. But this is absolutely the worst film in this trilogy. And it's too bad. Again, they're hard to make. And what's funny, part of me, I think I kind of give it a little bit of grace because of that, because it is hard to make a third film. A lot of the third films in a lot of these franchises are just not good to me, or I don't like. And it's just like, well, damn. Because for a better part, Last Stand in some ways feels like a lot of X-Men or Spider-Man 3 to me. There's too much happening to me. There's too many things going on in that movie for me. And it kind of, I think it has way more merit. Don't get me wrong. I like Spider-Man 3 more than I like X-Men The Last Stand. Don't get it twisted. But it kind of fits in kind of those same veins. So again, it's unfortunate, but I am happy to know that it made money, which I think is the reason we do start to see more down the line. It was only 2 years removed from Batman Begins and Iron Man, right? Like it wasn't too much space in between some more greatness around the corner, even though this was absolutely disappointing. So I'm still glad it happened. I'm sad that it didn't happen the way we wanted to, for sure. But I'm glad that it still came out because, again, without The Last Stand, still, who knows where we would be? Who knows what movie would have came if it was just X2 and then nothingness afterwards? You know what I mean? So still a stepping stone, not the best stepping stone, but I think overall still a stepping stone. And yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
Co-sign the Spider-Man 3 point. Definitely far superior film. A film that I actually
still better movie.
I actively like Spider-Man 3. I actually it
Man,
really
I can't get with it as much as I want
Spider-Man
to.
3 doesn't stop working for me until literally the final act. Everything else actually works for me. I just rewatched the Sam Raimi trilogy. They did the re-release in theaters. I saw all 3 in theaters, and to see how the reputation for Spider-Man 3 is growing over time, and to see like the loving sort of adoration that people have for it. Like, yes, we know the Bully Maguire stuff is not great, but we can
it's funny.
We can look at it and laugh at it because we're like, where did this dramatic ass turn come from, bro? Like this swooping hair, the dancing, like all of that shit. But I would defend Spider-Man 3 to anybody. I know it has its problems, but third films, have their difficulties, and third films and superhero franchises was a novelty at this point. We had not done it,
Yeah.
you know, and I remember Kevin Feige talked about this a lot in the lead up to Avengers Endgame, how there weren't really proper endings to superhero stories in cinema. And he wanted to craft a real, true, proper ending with Avengers Endgame, which had taken place 22 films after the first one. But
Crazy.
to think that we eventually did get there, to see like, oh my God, this can be what it feels like to have an earned moment, to feel all of that payoff of the years of investment, to watch these characters we've grown with and that we've grown connected to have really, really satisfying conclusions. That's what we could get to. We just had to wait like 13 years, but that's okay. We waited and we eventually did get it. And for some people, we might have even gotten it with The Dark Knight. I would not say that. The Dark Knight Rises got a lot of problems with that movie.
That's another third movie hard to make,
that just
man.
did not do it for me in the ways that I wanted it to. It's really difficult, and so I do have some leeway, I guess, for X-Men The Last Stand in that respect. And also, I mean, there's just so many extenuating circumstances. I think that this is where we really started to see the studios take shape in the pressure that they would mount against their filmmakers and their productions, and how that would ultimately be a huge factor in many big budget movies that we would ultimately come to see over the course of many years. Like, now that this has become like a commonplace story, we hear about studio interference. You know, we hear about it with all of the crazy shit that happened at Warner Brothers and DC, just the decision making and the inconsistency and the questionable decision, like everything. It's just like, yo, just stop, just like relax. Try to get a filmmaker that knows what they're doing and let them cook, let them do what they need to do. A lot of that really kind of started here. Rush production dates and deadlines, not having directors, going through multiple directors, multiple script writes and rewrites, and all of the stuff that just makes these massive productions really, really complicated to make satisfying for people. I remember this being one of the first true testaments for me in my youth and growing up and becoming more enamored with filmmaking as being an example of that. And ultimately it did rear its head in the final product, which is unfortunate, but it's a movie I still do revisit occasionally, and I still do find some things out of it to enjoy. And ultimately we still get the iconic characters that we kind of still love to this day. Like, I still love, of course, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and Patrick Stewart as Xavier and Ian McKellen as Magneto. Like, a lot of these characters were some of the first live action characters from superhero cinema that I ever saw and that I grew attached to. And they gave us that, you know, and they ultimately continued on down in the future with other X-Men movies, which we will certainly get to over the course of the next few weeks. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the original X-Men trilogy that came out from 2000 to 2006. If you've seen these movies, which I know a lot of you have, or if you just want to talk about any of these films in depth, in detail with us, hit us up. Let us know what you think.